Before time, before space, before any universe existed, there was only the ether, infinite, pure realm of raw energy that underpinned all reality. From this ether emerged the Keepers, immortal, godlike guardians sworn to maintain balance across every dimension. Two of them would later shape the fate of all existence. One would take the form of the eccentric, all-knowing Dr. Monty. The other would corrupt into the manipulative Shadow Man. These two were once mortal men who lived in England, of all places, during the 16th century. First was John Dee, renowned scholar, mathematician, astronomer, and trusted advisor to Queen Elizabeth I, who became Dr. Monty. The second was his friend, Edward Kelly, his closest associate and gifted scrying partner, who became the Shadow Man. John Dee spent his life seeking angelic wisdom. Through crystal gazing and sacred rituals, he made contact with beings from the ether itself. Together with Edward Kelly, he created the Enochian language, a complete tongue of symbols and sounds that mirrored the ancient runes of the Keepers. Dee pursued pure knowledge and immortality for the benefit of mankind. Kelly, however, was drawn further into forbidden shadows, touching the corrosive forces of the dark ether. One stayed true to the light, the other fell. When Kelly's ambition twisted him beyond saving, Dee fought desperately to pull his friend back from the abyss. In that final struggle, both men were elevated, transformed into Keepers themselves, granted eternal life as guardians of reality. Yet the corruption that had claimed Kelly remained deep within him. Monty would one day speak of his old companion with sorrow, remembering him as the sweetest, most charming soul he'd ever known. The two of them, once sharing laughter and grand dreams before the darkness took hold. Power corrupts even the greatest. Some of the Keepers grew hungry for more. They turned to the dark ether, a chaotic mirror realm of pure destruction and entropy, and were twisted into monstrous beings. These fallen ones, fallen angels if you will, became the Apothicons, reality-devouring horrors whose only desire was to consume Argatha, the pure heart of the ether, and rule over all of creation. War erupted across the dimensions. The uncorrupted Keepers fought with everything they possessed. In the end, they prevailed. The Apothicons were banished into the dark ether, and the rift was sealed. Yet, the Apothicons were not truly defeated. Trapped but seething with hatred, they turned their gaze to one small blue world, Earth. This planet alone held a natural gateway straight into Argatha. If they could corrupt his people from within, they could tear the veil open once more and escape forever. Their long, patient plan was born. Facing final defeat, the Apothicons made one last desperate strike before the seal closed forever. Using portals torn through the fabric of existence, they hurled meteorites infused with element 115, also known as Etherium, towards Earth across countless realities. Element 115, the physical form of ether energy itself, is no ordinary stone. In the smallest traces, it grants miracles, teleportation, weapons of pure energy, elixirs of superhuman strength. In greater amounts, it raises the dead, shatters minds, and fractures space and time itself. The Apothicons have poisoned these meteors, the darkest essence of their realm, so that whoever found them would be driven to endless war and eventual catastrophe. They also placed the Ether Pyramid, what later ages would call the MPD, upon the surface of the moon as a hidden anchor waiting for their return. In our world, the first of these meteors struck on the 3rd day of September in the year 5 AD, near what would one day be known as Purgatory Point. The stones burned with an ominous red-orange glow, crackling with unstable lightning, raw corruption, fresh from the dark ether. Over centuries, as the keepers worked to contain the damage, many of the stones took on a calmer form, grey rock, etched with intricate runes and glowing with steady, blue, energetic light. The seeds of ruin have been planted deep in the earth. Humanity would one day unearth them exactly as the Apothicons had intended. More than 1,000 years now passed. The buried element 115 slowly awakened. In the late 13th century, scholars and alchemists in northern France began to experiment with fragments of the glowing rock. This energy tore open the dimensional wall. On the 15th day of January, in the year 1292, the Great War began. Not the war of kings and empires that history would later record in 1914. This was a war of humanity against the horrors pouring through from beyond. The Apothicons flooded our world with creatures known as Margwars, and the risen dead known as the Ancients, and waves of pure madness. Their goal was simple: reach the earthly gateway to Argatha and seize godhood once more. Humanity stood on the brink of annihilation. Then the Keepers returned to our aid, bringing with them 4 legendary warriors, displaced through time and known as Primus, ancient incarnations of our beloved cast: Edward Richtofen, Nikolai Belinsky, Tank Dempsey, and Takeo Masaki. These 4 knights wielded the elemental staffs of ice, fire, wind, and lightning, weapons forged from pure ether that could turn back the tide of the Apothicons' darkness. On the 14th day of April in 1294, a knight named Sir Pablo Marinus was saved from a Margwar by these 4 unknown heroes. He lived long enough to record everything he witnessed. The war raged across Europe for 7 terrible years. Ancient castles crumbled, reality itself warped and screamed. The Apothicons unleashed soul-devouring beasts and storms that bent the laws of nature. Yet humanity, as they do, refused to fall. Among the bravest defenders was a powerful Austrian king known as the Wolf King. He fought shoulder to shoulder with Primus, accompanied always by 2 loyal wolves that charged into battle at his side, giving him his enduring name and the symbol he wore into battle. On the 31st day of December in 1299, the final battle was fought. Primus, strengthened by the Keepers and armed with the elemental staffs, cleansed the land of the sickness as far as the eye could see. The surviving Apothicons were hurled back into the dark ether, the Great War ended, and the rift sealed. On the 1st day of January, in the year 1300, before Primus vanished from the pages of history, they gave the Wolf King one final command: begin construction of a castle that would stand for centuries and shape events yet to come. This castle would later be known as Der Eisendrache. The Wolf King later recounted to his son, "While I consider myself to be a brave king, I will tell you, my son, that those 4 were the bravest warriors I have ever seen. I had the privilege to fight alongside them in the great battle many years ago where we defeated the creatures from beyond and the Dead Eaters. They disappeared after we claimed victory, never to be heard from again. The last thing they told me was to build my castle here, in this very location, before they disappeared." The Apothicons had finally been driven back. But the meteorites they had sent more than a millennium earlier still lay buried across the world, waiting in silence. And so, the ancient foundations of our world was laid. Every future outbreak of the undead, every weapon powered by a glowing rock, every desperate struggle for survival can be traced directly to those poisoned meteors and to the Great War that nearly ended everything. Element 115 is not a gift of nature. It is a weapon planted by gods who had once been men. The cycle of death and resurrection that would one day consume the 20th century was already ticking beneath our feet. The original Great War was fought with sword and staff and the howl of wolves, nothing more. The colossal machines of war that would one day walk the same scarred ground belonged to a far later age. The Great War is over, the Apothicons are banished. Element 115 sleeps beneath the soil. Humanity believes it has triumphed. They have no idea what has been set in motion.